Well, hello. And as I pressed record on this podcast, I think the last thing I shared with you, Megan, is let's amplify some hope. And that's what we're doing. This is a brand new podcast, mini series, so to speak. I am grateful to be here in what is Hope, the Hope Amplified podcast, with my partner and thought partner and bandmate and fellow chef and co-host Meghan Lawson, and this is Sean Gaillard here.
Well, I'm really excited to do this with you. What a great conversation. As you have said in your Principal Liner Notes podcast, sometimes we should press record earlier because we end up having these great conversations and then we're like, "Oh yeah, that's right. We were here to record something. Maybe we should go ahead and press record."
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we kind of like what we were doing just before. And in fact, that this conversation, and really I consider all of, whether it's a podcast or not, it's a conversation that all are invited to. But this podcast came out of your last appearance on Principal Liner Notes podcast, and where we get into this kind of beautiful series of rabbit holes of conversations on whatever topic or whatever issue or whatever idea. And really to kind of give the origin story of Hope Amplified. I think before we had pressed record on Principal Liner Notes podcast, I think I had asked you, I don't know, I don't even know how it started, but you just started talking about hope and how this may be the germ of an idea that you've been playing with for a follow-up to your legacy of learning book. But I think probably a good starting point for Hope Amplified, as we're amplifying hope for our PLN and hopefully the rest of the world, is maybe your journey with Hope, Megan, and what kind of led you to this conversation that we're having now on a new podcast.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was introduced to Jamie Mead, who at that time was the vice president at Battelle for Kids. And she had taken a year, I believe a year sabbatical to go and research and study the science of hope. And then she brought learning around the science of hope back to Battelle for Kids. And that learning made its way into my previous school district. And this, in our case, this learning was in service of a tool that they have called the Student Experience 21, which measures hope, belonging, engagement, and 21st century learning, which always makes me giggle because it's like, wow, how long do we need to name what century we're in order to understand what kind of learning we need? But anyway, so yeah, we were planning for a summer learning experience for staff as a team. I had this precious opportunity to be a part of this incredible teaching and learning team there, and we found a video of Jamie explaining what hope is. And uh, well, a little bit about that. Actually, I'm going to back up for a second because I haven't told you this full story. But when we were planning for the summer learning experience, we essentially found ourselves worrying about planning summer learning for people who didn't want to be there.
Mm,
And we were getting a little stuck on that. Like, oh, how do we make it great for? And then I think we just had this epiphany where maybe you don't always plan the experience going into it thinking that there's a group of people who are going to hate this. Maybe you make sure that you're going to be able to thrill and delight the people who you know probably want to be there, and hope that maybe those in the middle might find it just as valuable and enjoyable. And we, after the fact, were shocked to hear what positive feedback we got from so many, including people who typically didn't have a lot of positive feedback to share about professional learning experiences with us. And I think what we were able to attribute a lot of that to was the thirst people had for understanding how to get students more engaged in their learning process and more engaged at school, and even simply getting kids to school, period. And I think there's a lot of struggles with chronic absenteeism out there across schools and districts. And so we shared that video of Jamie explaining hope, and something about talking about hope really resonated with that staff. And as I continue to work with other staffs through my work with Legacy of Learning, because there is some of that research in my text, I can tell that the energy in the room changes when we get to talking about hope. And it's not a new science, but it's an emerging science as far as people's familiarity with it. And so, a little bit about hope. Hope is the belief that tomorrow can be better than today and that we are the ones who can make it so. And the reason why knowing that is so critical is because often what looks like laziness in schools is, in fact, hopelessness. And I think that reframing is really important because um, I recently read a very short article that I would recommend to people that we could probably put in the show notes. And it's called Willing to be Disturbed.
Hmm.
Are you willing to be disturbed? And one of the sentences in that text that I've really been thinking about lately is that it's not our differences that divide us, it's our judgments about those differences.
Hmm.
And so, judgments about why behaviors look the way that they do in our schools, students, or with staff can be really divisive and can lead to, I don't know, a lack of perseverance or resilience around some challenges that we're all facing. So, understanding hope can really reframe that for us and also give us a path forward. And so, what I love about hope is that we often, it's actionable, and yet we often conflate it with wishing. So, we'll say, I hope you have a good day, or I hope this happens. But really, we're
Hmm.
wishing. But it's actually something that has a lot of action behind it. And I love anything that has action verbs. I love feeling like I'm moving forward, I'm growing. That is the definition of happiness for me, as I say in chapter 1 of Legacy of Learning. So, hope is essentially made up of three components: goals, we need to be clear about where we're trying to go, pathways to reach those goals, or way power. And multiple pathways to get there that we could see, like, okay, I could achieve this, and here are some ways I might be able to do that. And then willpower. So because I can have this goal that means something to me, and that's very motivating, and I can see that there are ways for me to get there, I'm encouraged to give good effort and try again tomorrow and be resilient in the face of challenge. And I'm going to start seeing challenges actually as opportunities instead of barriers.
Hmm.
And when I wish I could find this video. I don't know if Jamie still speaks on it on the Battelle for Kids website, but I know she still speaks on the topic of hope all around the country. And a lot of her research is based on the research of C.S. Snyder. And there's also the book Hope Rising, which I know you and I both have been reading.
Here.
Yes. Yes, yes. But what I love that she says, and this is so humble and true, and I think a lot of us can relate to it as teachers and principals and district leaders, is that when she learned that about hope, she realized that as an English teacher, which you and I both were, she thought she was there to teach English, but English was a tool for the future, for the unique future of every student. And if she could help them see that and work toward that, then class became much more meaningful than this class is about getting better at English.
Wow. That I love how you framed all of that. And I'm also getting a beautiful flashback to our last conversation on this because it really inspired and empowered me to kind of do some research and to pick up Hope Rising and some other books. One of them I shared with you last week when I went to Barnes and Noble. One a person that I have deep respect and affection for, and I know you do as well, Jane Goodall,
Yes.
and the Book of Hope, which came out a couple of years ago. And in her introduction to Hope, which I think is, I mean, your overture is just so beautifully wrought for our first inaugural episode. Is she gives some similar things in terms of why hope and the need for hope, and she writes here, my reasons for hope in these dark times will become clear in this book. But for now, let me say that without hope, all is lost. It is a crucial survival trait. Let me emphasize that it is a crucial survival trait that has sustained our species from the time of our Stone Age ancestors. Certainly, my own improbable journey would have been impossible had I lacked hope. And then she goes on to conclude, hope is contagious. Your actions will inspire others. So,
Mm.
for somebody that, I probably, if you look behind, I probably listen to unapologetically listen to one too many Beatle albums, and I believe that music is rooted in this kind of language of hope. Somebody that has celebrated Mondays. I wrote this book called The Pepper Effect, which very much like Legacy of Hope is kind of our manifesto of our view of the world, a hopeful view of the world. So when you marriage hope, and I'm often criticized for being Mr. Positive and being and all this stuff, and so, but I felt like there's a certain operating principle on which hope works. um, so then when I read what Jane Goodall writes about, this famous scientist and studier of different species and human civilization, to say hope is a crucial survival trait. Well, Dr. Goodall, I think I'll take that. And then when you talk about hope as being a science, an emerging science of hope, it just empowers the moves that I believe that leaders, and all leaders, and whether you're a classroom teacher, paraprofessional, assistant superintendent, principal, or whatever it is, hope has been kind of a critical part of our respective personal and professional journeys. So I greatly invite the conversation on the science of hope here. I really do.
Oh, well, I appreciate you sharing that excerpt. It gets me more excited to read that book that you were kind enough to share with me, from Jane Goodall. I think she's really onto something there. And actually, as you get deeper into Hope Rising, they talk a lot about collective hope. So hope by itself is powerful. The collective hope of a group of individuals, is even more powerful. And so, something that I think is sometimes lost in conversations about schools is, I told you that story about professional learning and how, there's some faces of some people who could had a tendency to be a bit, prickly or grumpy, that would come to mind when we were trying to plan for the staff. And learning about hope allowed me to reframe those kinds of behaviors and those kinds of reactions to say, well, what if this isn't grumpiness? What if this is hopelessness? And how might we provide clarity about goals and pathways so that together we can have some collective resilience around supporting our students and their learning? And the research shows that teachers can lend kids their hope, but only if they themselves have hope to give.
Mm.
And so I think that's really important. And I'm often in conversations. I was just in one this last week where I had to name for us at a table, with a couple leaders. I feel like we're leaping over the adults, and because of our heart for kids, and we're forgetting that the best way to student growth, and changes in the student experience is through staff, and their learning and their growth and their experience. And I'm going to keep talking about that because it's so easy to miss when you see so many daunting challenges in front of you in a school as you work to move any organization forward, any organization that supports kids. We cannot skip over adults and their learning, and adults and therefore their hope. Hopeful teachers will lead hopeful classrooms. Happy teachers will lead happy classrooms. Resilient teachers will lead resilient classrooms. Like, take whatever word you're looking for. We have to see the role that we play in nourishing the conditions that make good work possible for teachers and for educators, regardless of what name a role in a school.
Yeah, and we often diminish the power of hope. You and I have talked about this as well, and I love how, you know And I've been guilty of this line about, we've got to believe in kids. We've got to believe, you've got to believe. If you don't believe, they don't believe. I'll quote Hattie and collective teacher efficacy, which I have misinterpreted, but here you've given the proper move to ignite that. In order for that to happen, you as the leader, you can't jump over the teachers, and it's real easy to do that. You or whoever it is in whatever organization. I do hope that this podcast um, lends itself well in other industries, even though you and I are primarily in education, and that's our gig. But but I would say that there is, if we as the leader, if we are not espousing and expressing and leaning in to hope into the people that we serve, in this case the teachers or middle management or whatever you want to call it, then the place where hope needs to land, most importantly, the student, the customer, the client, the community that you're serving, it's not going to happen. And then what usually ensues is that leadership burnout, is that compassion fatigue, is that hopelessness. All behavior is communication. Um, and it's important that we are impeccable with our words, intentional with our moves, and really leaning into hope in principal schools, so to speak, and in principal circles. The notion that hope is not a strategy, and I don't know who that's attributed to, is kind of seen as a badge of honor. That no, you can't rely on hope. That's Pollyannish. That's Peter Panish. That's Beatlesque. You've got to get in and yes, yes, we you just can't sit on high and say all will be hopeful, or you can't tweet your way into hope. You can't stand on a table with a t-shirt that says hope, right? There are some real intentional, actionable, small moves to take a page from your book, your beautiful book, Legacy of Learning, that we must do. And I think that's the other hope of this podcast is in addition to discussing ideas and sharing our thoughts about hope as an art and a science, and marrying that art and science together. Our hope is that once we marriage those two things together, that we're sharing some actionable ideas for our listeners. And part of that is through the intentional power of story. And I know that we were kind of talking about kind of what story we were going to talk about with hope in our first episode. And I would love for you to start off by sharing that just wonderful Instagram picture, that I hope you put into a frame somewhere. If not, I'm going to do it and hang it up in my office or what have you. I just adore that picture, because it is very life affirming, but it is also very hope renewing. And I would just love for you to kind of talk about the story behind that picture and how I feel it's a great emblem of the hope, that the art and science of hope that you are espousing, that we're espousing.
Well, you're so good at making people feel so seen. And so thank you for your appreciation for that picture and for calling that out in our conversation. If you're listening and not watching, I'm flipping through some pages of the notebook because, as always, Sean is saying really smart things that are reminding me of a connection I can make to other learning that I did this past week. But it's because you mentioned storytelling and how this particular podcast will, much like every, I think every work that I have had the privilege of reading of yours or listening to of yours, has been so deeply rooted in story and in storytelling. And I just want to affirm how important that is. I think we all can recognize, that stories connect us and they connect us in the human spirit. And it was the earliest form of learning for us, would be sitting and learning from story. But I was recently in a PD from the Art of Coaching teams, Alina Aguilar, and they were talking about the evolved brain versus the lizard brain, and how critical storytelling can be to help people get access to the good, the good place that we need our brain to be in order to be learning and open-minded, and not listening for like danger and conflict and am I safe here. When we're in story, we tend to spend more time in the evolved part of our brain, and we get access to the better neurochemicals. So anyway, that's just a connection I was making. So let's get into a story. So speaking of things that just bring me joy and allow me to be in my evolved brain, recently this past week, our district invited fifth and sixth graders to join us for a monthly principals meeting. And this group of fifth and sixth graders, they have this incredible advisor who had this vision for a leadership group, growing leadership skills and intermediate students. And so kids can opt into being a part of this club. And once a month, they are taking a field trip to see leadership in action. So they're seeing leadership across industries with different groups of people. And then they're sort of studying what they've noticed and wondered about, and what does that make them think then about leadership for themselves in the now, and aspirationally, goals for the future, pathways for the future, just making some connections there between hope and their research. But anyway, so they joined us this past week and had a series of questions that they had generated. And they have these cute little, like in the picture, you can see they've got a clipboard, and they're writing down notes that they're taking. And we were standing together, when I first walked in the room, I didn't share this part of the story with you. The teacher wasn't sure probably like what exactly I would want to do for the quote meet and greet. And so they're used to sort of being seated and very, compliant. I wait for somebody to tell me exactly what to do. And I could see that there was some trepidation, as you can imagine. They're fifth and sixth graders, and there's all these different principals, people who are in charge that are coming in the room, and district office people. And that can be a little intimidating. And I was inviting them, hey, in a moment here, like, please get up and we're going to be standing around. Like, you come stand with us. Let's be on equal footing. Let's be in circles together. There's a lot of research from Peter. Let's see, community, the structure of belonging. What's
Yeah.
that book? Yeah. The power of circles, right? No power structure exists in the way that we're organized, and therefore we all share this space together, and everyone's voice matters equally. So we were standing in circles on equal footing, just side by side in the work, and they were asking us questions about leadership. And it was just the picture that you're referencing. I was just so enthralled by the kinds of questions that they were asking, because they were very deep, meaningful questions. I mean, one of them was, I mentioned to you, like, how do you stay calm? Because I think they can see that there are plenty of hard things that go on in a day with adults. Like, how are these adults remaining calm in situations that feel hard or feel stressful? And I think just honesty in those moments is so important. I said, well, a lot of times we're not calm, we're just pretending.
Yeah.
And so I
True.
think just for them to hear from adults, like, you aren't always going to feel calm. Like, it is normal to experience some stress in difficult times, but sometimes we're faking it till we make it. We're just sort of pausing and thinking about, how do I want to show up in this particular situation that's going to benefit the cause at hand, or the outcome that we need to have happen here. So when they left, after the meet and greet, they uh, lingered for about 20 minutes and observed our meeting in action. And they saw the first portion of our meeting, as a lot of us have with our meetings. We were honoring our norms, and we were, relationship and connection before content. And so there was some getting to know each other more deeply, some games, some laughing, some just enjoying each other, getting answers wrong on a quiz, kind of, humanity in motion that they were able to enjoy and appreciate. And when they left, the advisor was kind enough to share his notes from what the kinds of things that they were saying in their debrief. And they were saying things like, wow, it seems like they're friends. They were laughing. They were enjoying each other. We thought that when principals met, it was only about serious things, but they can have fun in their work too. And that was everything that I really hoped for them to see. And I think there might be some people they also asked us questions like, well, what do you do to avoid conflict? And we said, we don't avoid conflict. We welcome it. It's just a matter of, how do we talk through hard things together that matters. It's
Hmm.
not, you can't avoid conflict. It's how do you create a space that's brave to where you can have good conversations and still keep the relationship intact and healthy and moving forward and keep the work moving forward. So anyway, they were sending us those kinds of things in their debrief. And I think I was glad to hear it because I think often we think we got to prepare these kids for the harsh realities of the real world. They already know these jobs are hard. They can see, they're smart enough to see and look around and say, wow, things are tough around here. How are these adults taking care of business? It's more so that I want them to see that while the jobs can be challenging, they can also be incredibly fun and rewarding. Because I just think when we talk about hope, I hope that people want to do these jobs in the future. I want people to see that maybe I want to be a teacher one day. I want
Yeah.
teachers to say, oh, maybe I want to be an instructional coach one day, or maybe I want to be a principal one day. And they don't have to want to do those things, but I just want everyone to know that it is attainable and that they're capable should they choose to explore those kinds of options, because the future of our world quite literally depends on our ability to um, do hard work, but also do it with our humanity intact and with the humanity of all at the center.
I love that. And I love how in that picture, and I love the backstory behind it because when you look at the picture at first glance, I mean, you see that circle that you're talking about. Two students are with you and the principal, and the student is just got this, you can just tell this kind of elevated sense of pride in a good way, and how they're, just standing up straight and tall. There's pride in the work, pride in the voice. It's student agency in action. But what I also love is how the two grown-ups in the picture are so in tune with that moment. And you see the principal standing with assistant superintendent, and I know you as a former principal, you know what that's like. Oh, I got the boss here, and eggshells and what have you, but still it's not that way. It's just such a welcoming environment, and you see that art and science of hope, and the expression on your face, as I told you, is beatific. It is just it's just amazing because it's all of those. To me, as I put myself in your shoes, it's like it's renewing, like, okay, it's working. And student voice, leadership, partnership, collaboration, we're all on equal ground here. So that picture, just gave me such a renewed sense of hope, which is a small move, I think, for those in PLN and for those that follow leaders such as yourself, on X or Instagram or LinkedIn, because sometimes it can be a catalyst for imposter syndrome, or it can be a catalyst for doubt. You and I have written about that and talked about that, and being very careful with what path that we take when we go down following leaders, and you do the comparison trap and those things. So I think a small move is, all right, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the course of my day, and I'm going to pick one leader I am following, or one educator that I really like, and I am going to look for hope. I am going to look for hope. I am going to find, some practice in hope, that is going to empower me. And then maybe as a follow up, it could be to retweet that, repost it, reach out to that person and say, "Hey, thank you so much today. I saw that picture of you with the student and the principal, and it gave me a sense of hope. It inspired me." Again, it's just a really simple, small move. We're always on our phones. We're always in social media in some way, shape, or form. But maybe rather than going at it as, of course, looking for ideas and resources and what have you, or hey, I just want to see what my friend Megan is doing. But maybe it's, I'm going to find one leader that I like, and I'm going to look at their work through the lens of hope, or how is this going to give me a sense of hope? As Jane Goodall says, hope is contagious, right? And here's one small move that you can do. I love that picture.
Well, I'm going to practice that right now. So you were talking about if you see a picture that brings you hope, You're curious about, tell me more about what you're doing as a leader. And that seems like the vibes were just so high and people were deeply encouraged. Talk to us about your positive phone calls.
Oh, thank you so much. I have a lot of fun with that, and I'm very much inspired by other principles. And this is not an original practice of mine. There are many, many principles over the years that have either done the good news call of the day. I think of other principals. He's a retired principal, Mark French, just a great guy who has done that. I know John Wenstrom is a practicing principal in Michigan. Beth Huff as well do this practice. So I am one of many who do this. But basically the move is and it's real easy, low hanging fruit. I ask for teachers to nominate a student that is above and beyond the call of duty in terms of applying the principles of the energy bus. We're an energy bus school at Charles, England, and that's all about having a positive mindset and giving active possibilities and opportunities for our kids through the lens of positivity. And it's real simple. I just pull together a Google form, not nominate the kids, and then what I do, I'm real fortunate that I've got a really strong, active TA that is into it, and she's made little signs that say principal positive phone call. I go in to a classroom with that sign, and usually when the principal shows up, it's like, oh my God, what have I done? But I flipped it and like, hey, I'll say, hey, Miss Lawson, is so and so in your room today? Yeah, well, they're coming with me, and I'm kind of loud and goofy with it, and I have fun with it, and I might have to get some whistles or bring my guitar. Um, but there's just something really neat when you tell a child, "Hey, you're coming to the principal's office, and your teacher loves you so much that they want me to call, home to brag on you." And so it's wonderful. So I'll have 8, 9, 10 kids in my office. I don't have a big office. I'm glad I don't have a big office. And they're tearing up the office, and I've got all these. It's just fun. It's just a fun scene. And I call and whoever it is that's on their contact list, and I say, "This is Principal Sean Gaillard, and I am calling with good news. Your child today is just exemplifying." The fourth rule of the energy bus, which is love your passengers, or they're exemplifying this trait. And then the teacher has to write. I do ask that the teacher write a narrative about the student to for me to read, and they're very beautiful and detailed and just compassionate and I'm like in this kind of audience seat. So I'm on the phone. I'm watching the child whose face is beatific and is just lights up. And in some cases, these are students too. I serve a Title I school, so these are students who are coming from pretty harsh living circumstances, social circumstances. Um, they don't always have a lot of hope. So to see them transform and to hold their head high, which is one of the things I encourage our kids to do, walk with a purpose, hold your head high, dream big. And then to hear the parent who often, if I do call the parent, or not often, but sometimes I've had to call the parent under bad circumstances or negative circumstances, or this is a child that has often gotten in trouble in the past. And so to hear the because when the parent hears this is Principal Sean Gaylord, it gets quiet because they think, and I always have to say, I'm calling with good news, or it's not an emergency. Everything's okay because again, there some previous experiences with whether
Mhm.
they as a student or they as a parent with school leadership may have not always been the best. And then I've heard parents cry on the phone. You feel the pride. So I'm in this kind of beautiful intersection between parent and child. And let's face it, all of us as educators, we are in a beautiful intersection between parent and child, and it's sacred. It's just a neat space that we're in. And so I'm seeing this child, I'm hearing this parent, and then I'll usually say, man, isn't life great? Isn't the world a good place? Yeah. And do you want to talk to your baby right now? And so I get very emotional during those calls because you're in this beautiful intersection. I'm a parent. I love kids. I'm thinking of my daughters. I'm thinking about all the time that I spent in the principal's office for bad circumstances. I mean, so it is a very hope fulfilling thing. And then we do a picture, and thank you for acknowledging that. It's just a really neat space to be in, and it doesn't require a lot. My TA, who's wonderful, goes to the Dollar Tree and makes this really just goofy sign. I go with the sign. The teacher, it doesn't take anything out of the teacher's day. It's just a few minutes to just nominate a kid, write a few sentences, and then it is an hour out of my week. It is 1 hour out of my week and I try to do it on Mondays because I celebrate Monday. Um, and it's just 1 hour that s- sustains and can be life changing. It's a very life changing experience, I feel, and a hope filled experience. Thank you.
Mm. I think you also, there's so many takeaways I have from that story. I mean, one, I would love to be in the room to hear it sometime and to hear both what you have to say and what a parent has to say in return. Because I imagine, like you said, every day can bring challenges. And so, as a parent, to be working through, any challenge at any given day can bring them, and to receive a call from you and then to hear, oh, wow, we're celebrating, my most precious person in the world who has had challenges themselves. It's just so beautiful, and I love that you use the word intersection. I think that's a good reminder for all of us. And you briefly mentioned Celebrate Monday. For those who don't know what it is, it might be nice for them to know about how Celebrate Monday amplifies hope.
Oh, well, thank you for that. It's an experience, and I give all credit. In fact, I always have his book close by. Todd Whitaker co-wrote a book, oh gosh, 7, 8 years ago, School Culture Rewired. Co-wrote it with Steve Grunert for ASCD. And I remember reading this book on a snow day, and I'm a big Todd Whitaker fan. He is my edu Beatles. How great principals lead, how great teachers do different, all that. So this is still my copy. And I don't know if you're watching this or if you're listening. If you go to page 13 of School Culture Rewired, and I'll put it up here to the screen. It says, if you want to bust a culture, celebrate Mondays. And there's me writing in the book, and I didn't have a highlighter. I had a pen close by, and that kind of just shifted my whole thinking. This was my first principalship, and I thought, why do we use Monday? Because Fridays were hard for me to wait to see the kids off. Some cases it was relief. I'll be real. I'm human, like my God, it's the weekend. But then in some cases, when as the more I started working with our students from the through the principal lens and knowing about some of their circumstances, it was hard seeing our kids knowing what they were going to go home to. And then Monday, God, what are we doing here? Why am I here? And then some of that kind of again impacts the kids. So I wanted to get our school at the time more active in social media. We were dealing with a lot of negative press, a lot of negative stories, and I thought, well, why don't we use Monday as our excuse to be positive and to set the tone for the week and I just said, guys, if you have Twitter or not, whatever it is, just hashtag celebrate Monday. That's all I need you to do and tweet out one positive thing in your day that's happening in the classroom or hallway or cafeteria. And so that what started off as a social experiment or really just an exercise to get the staff more involved in telling our story became this kind of phenomenon that I didn't anticipate. And some teachers, dropped off it, but then there were other teachers that just kind of kept at it. Then I started seeing it happen around the country and trend and other principles, taking what I just felt was a hashtag and turning it into Celebrate Monday assemblies or Celebrate Monday in morning meeting and it just became. And then when I think I know I was onto something when somebody from the International Space Station tweeted out, took a picture of like North America from outer space, and just said "Celebrate Monday, World," or so. And in fact, Todd Whitaker shared that tweet with me, which I was very privileged. So. It's again, it's a small move, and you don't have to celebrate Monday. You can celebrate any day. You can celebrate the week. But again, it's just a small move of being intentional to share something that's good and positive happening in your neighborhood, your backyard, your schoolhouse, your boardroom, whatever it may be. And you could use the hashtag Celebrate Monday or create your own hashtag Celebrate Hope. Celebrate, I know we've got Hope Amplified as our hashtag, but again, hope does not necessarily need to be, although it is a big grand concept. Small moves, if you do a series of small moves, and if it's one or two of you doing it, and you're impacting five or six kids or five or six different people, you can create a really what I feel is an amplification that is so needed in our world right now. I mean, we are recording this episode in the wake of a couple of hurricanes, and there's a lot of social and political unrest in our world, in our industry as educators. There's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of teachers and leaders that are hurting right now and are grieving and are dealing with situations that are horrible. You and I have been in hard, toxic situations, and it you know it can be tough. It is tough. So I don't want to diminish the hopelessness that people are feeling. And you and I are very much intentional with this podcast and how, okay, here's some small moves to amplify hope. It doesn't hope, you know, hope is not impossible, and hope can be a strategy to ignite good in others or good in a situation. So but I appreciate the lead in for Celebrate Monday. It's something it's been a great labor of love.
Well, I'm glad I asked because the ripple effect of that, I didn't know that part of the story about the International Space Station. That must have been a really powerful moment for you to see.
Yeah.
Wow, when we put ourselves out there with one small thing that resonated with us that we want to try to grow hope and possibility where we are, like look what it led to, and what a great. I mean, what makes you feel more hopeful than seeing that somebody was able to travel to space? I know that that
Yeah.
was a reference also to your last blog post from last week. Well, I love that you brought us back to small moves because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, as we think about how we grow hope, it's not just about hope in and of itself. Hope, belonging, and engagement all have reciprocity. So
Mm,
if you engage in a small move that is raising engagement, raising belonging, or raising hope, they all rise. If
mm,
one of them falls, they all fall. So as we think about strategies for engaging our staff or engaging students or strategies for growing our sense of belonging, those are also in service of growing hope. And I think that's just important to recognize. I also wanted to share a little bit about the impact hope can have and just how powerful hope can be. Um, the predictive power of hope, according to that text we referenced, Hope Rising, is more powerful than any other character trait. So when you think about character education in schools, name any trait that we aspire to. Hope is actually even more powerful in building the future than any other character trait. And I think the reason being that when we go through, as you just so beautifully outlined, when we go through trials and tribulations, as we all are, um, many of us have adverse childhood experiences. We have kids in our schools that are experiencing ACEs. I myself have a score of 7 out of 10. What happens is when we experience trauma, it can change our DNA, which can be a really hopeless thing to hear and can be a very concerning thing to hear. But what's the flip side of that, the beautiful end of that story, is that hope can actually restore our DNA. And so that's the power of hope. In fact, when they did a survey of people, um, this is a bit of a bleak statistic, but when a survey of people, they were able to predict with the answer to one question whether or not at the end of their study those people would still be in the world. And the question was, are you hopeful for your future?
Mm.
And the people who answered no, sadly, the majority of those people were no longer in existence by the time they had completed their study. So, hope is a stronger predictor of future success more than any other measure. That's more than academic measures of ACT, GPA. Um, in fact, in a study of college freshmen, hope was a stronger predictor of whether or not a student will return in the second semester more than their grades. And so I know we have a lot of data in schools, a lot of meaningful data. Sometimes it's too much data, and we can get some analysis paralysis there. But I think out of all the data we have in schools, measuring happiness levels, measuring hope, um, needs to be more at the center of our work.
Mm. Absolutely. And especially for an industry, education, which is data driven and scientifically based, um, all the more reason to use a research proven um, move to help make an impact, and an impact that is needed, in a space that can be unsteady, can be toxic, can be unsettling. Regardless of demographic, regardless of socioeconomic status, we're all, carrying something, and we all have a story to share, and we all have a story to tell. Speaking of stories, I know that in one of our hopes for Hope Amplified is to curate some stories and to feature and highlight others, who are practicing small moves of hope. And I'm excited about kind of the rough idea that we have there. And as we continue to share our stories, we're looking forward to having various guests on. Some who are good friends of ours, and some that are mutual friends, and really highlighting their work, and to kind of prolong in a good way the art and science of hope in education and the world, because there are some beautiful stories that are happening in which folks are having this sense of hope. So hence the title, Amplifying Hope. We want to take the science of hope, marriage it with art, but then we want to amplify it and share the stories of others and curate their good works.
I'm really looking forward to hearing those stories. And I think bringing us full circle back to storytelling, I appreciate that you've done that here. Before we bring things to a close, I think a small move that we can all take away from today's conversation is how do we bring more storytelling into the schoolhouse? Because it can be a very uh, hope amplifying move to make, but it's also very good for our well-being, and our social and emotional aspects of our well-being can actually trump our academic um, focus. I think that is in service of greater goals that we have, and that's what hope is. Hope is the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. We are the ones who can make it so. We have clear goals, clear pathways to get there, then we can be more resilient, and that is hope in action. That's hope amplified.
I think that's a great pause on our conversation, ongoing conversation for Hope, Megan, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this project with you, and I'm looking forward to our next small moves together as we amplify hope and well-being and good things and small moves for education in our world.
Well, I am so grateful to have this experience with you and with others. I'm excited to hear more stories of hope. And yeah, let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are tuning in and listening, we encourage you to follow us both on our respective social media feeds, and we'll include all of those things in the show notes, and we would also encourage you as well to follow and use the hashtag hope amplified to continue the conversation. So as we wrap up our podcast, we're pressing pause, but we're not stopping the conversation. And I know Megan and I are always willing and welcome ideas and thoughts and your stories of hope. And just as kind of a quick reminder for those who are listening, you are the hope that amplifies our world. And you all have an important story to share. And when things may seem bleak or hopeless, there is someone who is looking to you for hope. And I would say, Megan, speaking on both of our behalves, we are two of those folks that are looking to those for hope as well. So we invite and welcome and are grateful for the hope that you bring to the world.
Absolutely.
This is Sean Gaillard with Meghan Lawson. Thank you so much for tuning in to our inaugural episode of Hope Amplified. Feel free to check our show notes for resources and the books that we've referenced. And again, please follow us on social media and follow the hashtag Hope Amplified. We look forward to bringing you back for our next episode, and we'll have one of our guests on board. Thank you so much for tuning in.